Let's have a talk, let's have a chat, talking about a little this and that. Hello and welcome to another episode of This and That. I am your host, Mary Easterling, and today we are going to be doing another episode on This and That. I'm not sure if this is a new series yet or what, but this is by Bob Neumann. But before I begin, to listen to anything else from This and That, go to talkingaboutthисandthat.wordpress.com and click on the podcast link. Anything by Bob Neumann will be featured on our blog page. The blog page has read more links. Click on them. They will take you to articles. The articles have the podcast, which opens in a separate tab, so you can listen while you look. This is entitled Don't You See? Written November 21st, 2000. Bob writes, last night I had a quote-unquote interesting experience, or at least that is a description of what took place that is quote-unquote safe, at least for a season. It all started in the field of vision where I stood on top of a great stone spire, the kind you see in old movies about quote-unquote cowboys and Indians. There is a place quote-unquote out west called quote-unquote Monument Valley, where mountains and rock predominate. Frankly, it's a desolate wasteland, but a great backdrop to the stories that need to be told. And I guess that is why the King of Kings used it. I found myself standing on this platform of rock lifted supernaturally above the surrounding terrain. In the far distance on the ground, I quote-unquote saw specks moving across the valley floor, traveling slowly from the right to the left. After a while, as their slow progress continued, I quote-unquote saw another group coming from the upper left of my quote-unquote field of vision. This second group was moving very fast in the direction of the slower first group. My immediate quote-unquote reaction was that quote-unquote an attack was coming. In my quote-unquote mind, I quote-unquote saw countless Hollywood creations of epic proportions where the quote-unquote good guys are attacked by the quote-unquote bad guys and eventually win. Then I heard his voice ask, "Are you sure?" At that point, I quote-unquote stepped back and looked at the Lamb of God. He was dressed in the same bib overalls he wore when I saw him last. A vision I chose not to write down and send out in the early morning 2 weeks ago right now. It was a vision more momentous than any I had ever seen, now evaluated in hindsight. It is because of that quote-unquote sin I am to write what took place now. Seeing him dressed that way, I was brought back to the reality that I had willfully disobeyed. Again he asked, "Are you sure?" I had no answer. I really don't know which makes all my quote-unquote interpretations and quote-unquote evaluations valueless. Like I said in the past, he can outweigh anyone and everyone. So I answered, quote-unquote, "No, Lord." With that, he pointed back at the converging quote-unquote specks on the valley floor. "What do you want to do?" he asked. And suddenly in my mind, I saw a collage of quote-unquote images and quote-unquote characters. Things from my memories, John Wayne, Errol Flynn, and many others valiantly quote-unquote in battle. Vivid, yes, but all quote-unquote make-believe from TV and the silver screen. Inside me was an answer I wanted to give, yet I knew something was wrong. At that point, I felt his hand on my shoulder, and I began to cry. "What do you want to do, dog?" he asked, in that quiet voice I had heard in times of pain and fear. I looked into his face and realized I was safe, and I answered, "I want to warn them, Lord," I replied. "Who would you warn?" he asked. "The people about to be attacked," is the response. "But haven't you done that over and over?" I looked back at him and had nothing to say. What could I say? "Don't take it so hard, dog. Your nature is to warn and protect. I know because I made you and placed you. It is really quite simple. There are many who do what you have just done. They saw something in the far distance, reacted out of their emotions. Then there are many who heard something and acted out at their agendas. When he said heard, I realized I could, quote unquote, hear, quote unquote, stuff coming from the valley, but nothing was distinct or clear. But I was, quote unquote, hearing and, quote unquote, seeing. I, quote unquote, watched as the two groups continued to get closer. It would seem inevitable for those two groups to collide in the valley, he remarked. But what seems to man is often so much more from man than from God. I understood because it was how I had felt about much that is labeled, quote unquote, prophetic of late. Remember, this is back in 2000. But appearances are often made in order to deceive. Now that caught my attention. I turned back to him as he watched the two distant groups on the valley floor. Think on this, dog. Is it not written that Jerusalem would become a quote-unquote burdensome stone and a quote-unquote cup of trembling? Or, and I insert, as the Hebrew puts it, a threshold of shivering. That's an image, that is. Bob, God talking, continues to the nations. As usual, all I could say is, yes, Lord. You have to wonder if I really meant Palm Beach if you listen to the so-called prophets out there. Last night a school bus was bombed and people died. America watched. The Florida Chief Justice asked how much they could spend counting ballots before Florida was dropped from the Electoral College. Throughout the world, the saints are being murdered and raped and abused because they believe me and choose to follow me. With that, he turned to me and asked, when do you think they will realize they have taken their eyes off of me? But before I could say anything, I watched him shake his head and smile. You can't answer that because it is a loaded question, dog. Most have not taken their eyes off of me because they never had seen me. Likewise, they have never heard any words I have said. Some have indeed heard my voice. Some even have repented, but salvation is more than a moment of acceptance of one's sins. It is, quote-unquote, worked out with fear and trembling. Indeed, it is a race with a beginning and an end, but so few have ever chosen to run. To the Church of America, tell them this for me, dog. Did you ever learn that I am the Word and you live according to every word that comes from the mouth of God? Not on your own rationalizations and imaginations. So many of you dwell in Ephesus. You got lots of good works, quote unquote. At the same time, you have forsaken your first love. Then there are vast numbers of you who choose to live in Sardis and Thyatira and Pergamos, for the simple reason is that you enjoy the power you hold as you rule over your people. You have found that you can bless and curse like Balaam, and they think it is me. You manipulate and seduce like Jezebel, and justify it by using my name. Now you are divided at which man you will look to instead of me. All of you Laodiceans, all you who do what is right in your own eyes, so proud and arrogant because in America the people rule. There is no king in your land, your churches, and your hearts. I stopped, and I waited for him to continue. Instead, he just smiled and slowly shook his head. The two groups in the valley suddenly vanished, and I watched the barren and silent landscape. Still, there were many things to see, and there was the sound of wind blowing through the rock and the mountain, but the king stood silent. It was then I realized what he was trying to show me. So many were quote-unquote prophesying to the quote-unquote wind and from the quote-unquote wind. And I remembered Ezekiel was told to quote-unquote prophesy to the bones and the wind. Only old Zeke did so when God told him to do so. These quote-unquote prophets were quote-unquote seeing and quote-unquote hearing the quote-unquote events in the valley and are speaking as they lead themselves. They speak from hearing themselves and others like them when the Lamb was not speaking. I felt sick. I'm not blaming you, dog, for what others are doing in my name. The same happened to all my servants, so don't take it to yourself. Those people chose their own watchmen, and the false shepherds and false teachers said it was all of and from and by me. It's all written, dog. Just because men choose the easy way and the smooth road does not mean I have not tried, nor those who chose to follow and serve me. I am still faithful and true. If the hypocrites, Pharisees, Sadducees, and fools prefer wealth and power over my grace and mercy, it is their choice. Always has been. Everyone who quote unquote sees and quote unquote hears can only do so by my will and by the Spirit of the living God. Yet it is written that, quote unquote, my servant is blind and deaf. Servants do not speak up for, quote unquote, their rights, and dead men have none. I can do a lot with dead bones, dog, but I can do nothing for the ones who refuse to overcome. Don't you see, dog? I replied, I'm trying to, Lord. He replied, good answer, dog. He laughed, and I was back in reality. It isn't easy, but I have writ and now send. And this is where Bob stops. I am sending these out individually, although I get the sense that this is a grouping. There's at least one or two more in this. I just can't remember what the name is for this grouping. Right now, picture yourselves on that same high plateau. But the valley below you is so many places. It's your nation and what's going on in it. It's the world and what's going on in it. It's the church, or churches, and what's going on in it. The first thing that comes across my mind here in 2025, here in the United States of America, is the group that was moving slowly from right to left, and the group that rapidly came from the left and started heading out towards the first group, and it was upper left. And the thing that comes to me almost immediately is the concept of cannon fodder. The slow-moving group is moving slow because it's like, do we really want to be doing this? Is this really what we want to be doing? I don't know, but they're doing it. The other group is tight-knit. It's moving faster. It knows exactly where it's from. It knows exactly where it's about. But if you notice, Bob heard and saw, but he doesn't tell you that there was a meeting of either group. Instead, what he ends up with is nothing. Both groups disappear. Both groups are the world and the church within it. Those who think they hear from God, those who think that God is speaking, those that think this and think that and have opinions, etc., etc. And they are running at the mouth. And they are up to and into all sorts of stuff. And they're just doing, moving, shaking. And in their motion, they're slowly moving away from the right. Now, if I go political with this, we go, oh, from conservatism into leftism and socialism and one world order and antichrist and we don't want to do that. After doing these programs, as long as I've now been doing these programs dealing with Mr. Newman's stuff, yours truly, the host, actually had a encounter with another human being today and had a chitty chat with said human being about many things. One of the things is the fact that why are we fighting the inevitable? Church, listeners who are Christian, isn't the whole goal of your existence to one day see the King of Glory? I mean, unless you're hiding from him, then why don't you spend time in repentance? Get to know him. Start letting him work out in you so that you can walk out in your life with the fear of the Lord and with the trembling before him, that which pleases him, and keep walking it straight to your personal cross. He will faithfully drive the nails in for you. Once you've done that, you can be a dead man walking. For those who are moving from the right righteousness, right standing, right relationship with a righteous King of the universe to away from said righteous King of the universe. What is away from him? The dark, the death, the devil, everything that is vying to replace Jesus in you. No, I put to you the whole idea is that this is not home. This that you're living in right now is not the inheritance. Go to the last book, read at the end of the book, and you'll find the words new heaven and new earth. That's the inheritance. That's what we're getting. We don't want this. It's spoiled, ruined, defiled, evil. We want Him. The only reason I'm doing this is because it appears I'm supposed to be doing this. So I just keep right on going. I hear. I don't say a lot about what I hear unless it's commentary added in to Mr. Newman's stuff, or it's commentary that's added into somebody I host. If we look at this on the political scene, think dogs, 2 packs, and they're fit to have a dog fight. And actually, there is a dog fight. It's called a Third World War, and most of the world is kind of in it right now. So, if you're out there in that vision, you're cannon fodder. You should not ought to have been out there to begin with. As I told this individual, be like the snake. The snake sits. It scents the wind. It watches. It hides. Only time it does anything to defend itself is when it is in danger of being crushed. The only other time it does anything is when it's feeding. But it's careful when and where it feeds. It also is a snake that doesn't just bite, because we're told to be harmless like the dove. The dove just sits there and coos and flutters about. Yes, well, birds can fight, and they can inflict damage. And even a dove can give you a good pecking. A snake might not have venom sacs, but it might give you a good chewing. That'll hurt. Open your skin and give you an infection. We are the sheep amongst the wolves. The wolves are out there. Neither party was godly. Both were in the wrong place at the wrong time. It's just the people that came out of the left, or the specks from the left, knew what they were serving. The specks moving from the right did not. And that will do it for this episode of This and That. Until then...